And here we are, the last in the series. Took you along on my journey with regards to a real estate shoot. It all started with Nicole from Remax reaching out to me, asking me to shoot a particular home that she's going to be listing. The rest of the series was included me getting authorization to fly my drone, a conversation with regards to my experience with drones, showing you how I go about flying my drones, a screenshot on my cell phone. If you're interested in anything with regards to what we've talked about so far, the previous episodes, by all means, look in the description of this video and you'll see all the links for all the other episodes that are sitting there. So it's time for video. As we had talked about, if you've watched the other episodes, I shoot everything in 4K to give my clients the best quality they possibly can. I mean, 1080p is so yesterday, 4K, but 4K files are difficult to deal with. They're larger. The work that I do, the files that I deal with are computer that I deal with, my laptop is very, very powerful, but even with that, I have to do something called make proxy files in order to be able to deal with the files, which is something I'm about to show you. So basically what I do with regards to proxy files is I make fake files. Files that are much lower resolution so that the software, which is Adobe Premiere Pro, has an easier time editing through them. And then when it comes time to actually saving the files, it uses the original files. So the quality is really good and I can scrub all the way through it. I'm going to show you the whole process that I go through with regards to making proxy files and editing the files. So what I've got here is I've got a bunch of files. So what I did is I created a file, and here's all the video files that sit inside the shoot that I did today. But here's an old project file that I did for Nicole, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this one up. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I've got titling and her picture and her information and stuff like that sitting in that project file, so I'm going to cheat as I do. I mean, I've got to make my workflow I want to start from scratch on every single one. It would take me 10 times as long. So what I do is I open up one of her older files and then I make that into the newest file. There should be music sitting there already, an adjustment layer to make things look pretty. So this was her last property, 513 Rue de la Mornay. Wow, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So let's make a bin, and we'll call it old. And we're going to take all of the old footage from this particular project, and we're going to move it, all of the video from the other project, and we're going to move it into that file folder called old. Even though I've got a whole pile of it, doesn't matter because, frankly, the files aren't actually in this project, if that makes any sense. The files aren't actually in this project, they're just referencing. So I just want to put them in old. I could clean this up if I wanted to. I'm going to put this in old as well. So there you go. So I've prepped this project, old. So I've prepped this project. I'm going to get rid of all of that old video, and you'll notice that I have it all set up already in this project file if I unhide this with regards to her information. So there she is. There's a picture of her. Her information, of course, remains the same. She picked the color green so that that sort of identifies her. Now all I got to do is go back to this particular project, this little bit, and I'm going to put the new address in there. The number is 368, I think. So we're going to, nope, still not opening up. There we go, arrow. I think the address is 368 Wardlaw Avenue, 368. So 368 is where we're at. So we're going to close that, and now we're going to go to the next one. This is a street name, which is Wardlaw. This is me cheating because I've already got this all set up in another. So Wardlaw, Street Drive, whatever it is I've set up. So sort of set up templates, you know what I mean, for real estate agents that I deal with, and that's Avenue, and that's in Winnipeg as well. So if we have a look at the titles that we've got set up, Street Drive address, as we scrub through as we scrub through this. 368 Wardlaw's there, and Nicole Milner's there, and I've got that smaller in the middle, and then I've got bigger at the end as well. So there we go, we've got it all done. So main is the timeline, that's the music, which is Explorer together. Nicole profile pic is in there, so the only thing we've got. So now let's take this project file and we're gonna save it in her new one, which is Wardlaw, and we're gonna rename it to 368 Wardlaw Avenue, and the date is, I want to call it project file? Sure, no, I don't do that anymore. Project file. So the date is May the 24th in 2021. So now I've got it saved inside a project. Now what I need to do is I need to grab all of the information, all the video files that I took off the cards and put in that file folder. And if you look back a couple of episodes, that's where it was, real estate, Nicole, and that's where I put all of the video files, both from the drone and from my Canon mirrorless R6. So there's all the video files. Now here's a very boring process and a time-consuming process about to come up with regards to making proxy files. So as I had mentioned before, because I shoot in H.265 10-bit color in Canon C-Log mode, the files, and in 4K, the files are huge and very hard for any processing system to deal with. So what I need to do is I need to make proxy files, or fake files, lower resolution files, so that as I scrub along the timeline in my video file, I can actually see them without it locking up and stuff. So all of these files here are all the files from this video project. Now before I make the proxy files, I'm going to bring something to your attention. As you'll notice, 59.94 as far as frames per second, and then the drone files are 29.97. We need to have this conversation, all right? When we go to a movie theater, what we're accustomed to seeing is 24 frames per second. That's what everybody in North America sees. Everybody overseas, they see 25 frames per second, but the industry standard as far as film and what it is that we see is 24 frames per second. So what I want to have happen is I want all of these files to be interpreted so that they are at 24 frames per second, or more specifically 23.976. So I need to interpret those files to make sure that they're that way. Now, the advantage of that is they'll look very pleasing. There's a natural blur between frames, right? There's a natural sort of blur that goes on, and it looks very natural for us to see. Without a timeline properly shot at 24 frames per second, everything looks, for lack of a better term, junior. Everything looks like you shot it on a cell phone. You don't necessarily know what you're watching, but you just know that it's cheap. And when you see something that's shot at 24 frames per second, you just simply know that it looks rich and pleasing and cinematic. So my target frame rate is always 23.976. So here's all these files that I brought in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to modify, and then I'm going to interpret all of this footage at 23.976. Now that's a really nice simple step. Now everything that was 60 frames per second is now down to 25. It's going to make everything look smooth and rich and cinematic. Now everything's still highlighted, so now I'm going to make proxy files. So we're going to create proxy files so that this whole timeline is really easy to deal with. A right click, and Media Encoder is the one that actually makes the proxy files. It happens very automatically, seems like a really complex step. And for the most part, it is sort of a complex step, but frankly, once you get rolling with it, it's fine. It does make extra files and stuff like that on your computer, but it's impossible for me to make a video with 4K files and stuff like that without dealing with proxy files. Now that Media Encoder is opened up, what it's going to do is it's going to drag all of those files that were in that file folder. It's going to drag them all in there one by one by one, the drone files, the files one by one. The challenge is it's bringing them in at their original frame rate that they were shot at. The drone ones are shot at 30 frames per second. The ones off the Canon with the gimbal and stuff like that were all shot at 60 frames per second. So what I need to do is I actually need for this media encoder to actually finish importing all of those files, and once they start making them into proxy files, I need to actually stop the whole process. So let's wait until all of the files have come in. All right, so all the files have been brought in. You'll notice up at the top right-hand side, the file folders are started to be made. I'm going to hit stop. The file folders, not the file folders, the actual files, the proxy files have actually been started. So I stopped that whole process from those being started because I don't want that to happen. I don't want proxy files to be made at the original frame rate that they were filmed at, which was 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second. What I want to do is I want to interpret these files to 23.976 before I proceed, so the proxy files are going to be the same frame rate as how it is that I interpreted over the file. So you notice I've stopped that was halfway made. I'm going to reset that one. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top one, which I think is the top one, and I'm going to hit Control A so it selects all, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to interpret this footage at the proper frame rate. So there you go, window opens up and I'm looking for the frame rate of 23.976. And so there we go. We're going to interpret all of these files and make them all, for lack of a better term, 24 frames per second, but what it actually is 23.976. All right, so now all the files are all reset down to 24 frames per second. Now what I want to do is I want to make proxy files of all of these so that the whole editing process will go considerably smoother without doing that. So everything is now not highlighted. We're at the top file. All of these need to be made into proxy files. So we're going to hit play and allow Media Encoder making proxy files for everything that I shot today. This, by the way, is the longest, boringest process. Of course, I'm going to fast forward all the way through this. If you had a big, large video project that you were doing, you would set up so that you could make proxy files like overnight and just leave your computer run through all the files overnight. But for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to allow for Media Encoder to do its job and make all of the proxy files for us to deal with. And there it is, the end of the the making of the proxy files for this particular project. You may now have a little bit more insight of why I'm picky with regards to, this is done so I can close this window now, why I'm picky with regards to the shots that I take. Can you imagine if I shot everything in 4K all at the same time and just let it run? It would take forever. Those little files are just super small. And they still take forever to do. It's the longest and most boring process. So what I generally do is do something else while those proxy files are happening. All right, so now we're going to have a look at the timeline here real quick, and we'll have a look at the bottom that I'm indicating now. That's the music. This is called an adjustment layer. This is basically color grading, and we dealt with this titling already, so I showed you what that is. So what I want to do is I want to start placing the video on this timeline, right? All of these little marks are the beat of the music. So what I want to do is I want to use these beats of the music in order to put it. It just makes it for a much more professional look. I always like to start with the drone video first. It's the most dramatic and it really gets people to stay watching. So I like to start with the drone first, and you'll have a look. I've got 4 drone video files and I have absolutely no idea why there's 4 files there. It makes me insane to not know why. Oh, I think I dropped it for some reason, or allowed the drone to come back down. I don't know why I did that. And then that's one of the big ones. So we're good. You can see how I can. So what I want to do is I want to deal with the proxy files as opposed to actually dealing with the files themselves. It allows for much easier scrubbing through editing process. You know what I mean? It makes everything really nice. I actually take this down to a quarter. So what I want to do is I want to start with the first look on this video file. And it's where I started to raise it up. So let's do that. So let's hit an in point and then an out point. Love that. It's perfect. We're going to stick that on the timeline. Actually, we'll put it there, and you'll notice that I butt that right up against that mark. So everything fits in there nice. Let's have a conversation with regards to something called rec. Rec.709. That's sort of like industry standard color. And what we want to do is we want to put that LUT in place, which is called a lookup table. So I go in Premiere Pro and I go to Creative, I go to this, and then basically I have set up here a Rec 709 DLogM LUT. I click on that and boom, it's in place. It makes for all the colors to be industry standard. Remember, I shoot with log footage that extends the dynamic range. It makes the sky look nicer, but you need to convert it after to Rec 709, and then the footage looks so professional afterwards. And then what I have is I have a color grading adjustment layer on top of that helps with adding a little bit of teal in the shadows and adding a little bit more contrast. So this adjustment layer then adjusts and color grades everything that's underneath that line and makes things look even that much more professional. So that's the way that I start the video. So you'll notice the video starts that way, and we've already done with that particular beat, so we're good with that one. So now let's continue on with this particular footage to get something else that's interesting, and what I want to do is, there we go, I like that. So I shot that specific as it's coming away from that particular property, and now I'm going to put that on the timeline. And what I'm going to do as well, instead of taking the time, I'm actually going to copy all the attributes from that file. I'm going to paste the attributes to this one. So that's the next one. Let's see if it all color matched. Fine. Looks really good to me. We're going to keep going. I'm happy with the white balance. I'm happy with everything, the way that it looks. So we're going to keep backing off. And then do you remember when I shot, if you looked at the previous episodes that I shot, and I did something which is called a point of interest as far as an automatic rotation on the property. It looks really nice and professional that way. So I'm going to go ahead and plunk that down and shrink it down to the actual beat of the music I've already have in the hopper. Anyway, so I'm going to paste the attributes onto this one, and there we go. We're continuing on. I know for sure that I want to include some reveal of the water, the river in the background. So where is that? So let's wait and make sure that we can get the reveal of the water in the background. So here it comes, and here it comes. Because I remember backing off from the property and then revealed the water in the background. Let's scrub this forward. There it is. Oops. There it was. No, I don't need to do. There you go. I liked that a lot. It showed the river, and then it showed it backwards. So what I might want to do is actually shrink that in place, paste that, put that LUT in place, and then actually reverse that. Speed duration, and then go in here and then actually reverse it so it actually reveals it. I'm not happy with how bright this one is. See that? There you go. I like that. So perfect. It's a little green for me. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to these footages, and I'm actually going to go to the basic correction. I'm going to add 5 on the white balance and warm it up a little bit. I'm going to do that for this one as well so that they match. Add 5 to that one. Go to this one and add 5 to that one. And then why is that one on? Because that one's backwards. So there you go. Oh, nice, there's the property, and then it reveals that the river's in the background. So I'm happy with the way that that looks. We're going to fly into the property right away. Oh, see, now I like that. We're going the other way. So that's cool. Going the other way past that building. Oh, that looked nice and dramatic. The location of this property, in my opinion, is really, really important. So I want to make sure that I'm including that body of water so people know when they purchase this property they're nice and close to the river, and it's nice and easy to go for a walk. I really like the way that that looks and feels. So there you go. There's even a boat on the water in their background, so that's awesome. All right, enough of drone footage. We've enough of that building, and now we're going to fly into this property. So I want to make sure we're flying to that property. There it is again, flying to that property. And that's the end of that. So we're going to go here and back that up, paste the LUT in there. So that looks good that way. All right, so now we're done with the drone footage so far, right? That's enough frames as far as the drone footage to show what's going on with the property. Let's walk into the property now. If you've watched the other episodes, you remember that I like to do this little reveal thing with regards to peeking around bushes and trees and stuff like that. It wasn't tall enough the first time from, oh, do you see how choppy it was? So what I'm going to do is hit that proxy button, which I thought I had. And now I go back here and everything's nice and smooth. So I remember having to do that again because it was taller than I thought. So let's do that. That's the actual reveal of the front of the property. Oh, that looks nice and sweet. So there we go. We're going to put that in place. So here's what's different. This is C log as opposed to D log. C is obviously standing for Canon and D standing for DJI. So there's a different LUT for Canon than there is for DJI. So I've got that one set up. So that one's nice, except for it's a little bright in my opinion. So I think we can bring down the highlights. Bring down the highlights and bring down the shadows, and I think we can warm it up a little bit by like say 10. There you go. So now it looks nice. That's coming out of there. Change the music. That's there you go. The property that looks nice. All right, next frame, and that's why you go frame by frame the way that I showed you. If you were watching the rest of these episodes, perfect. In point, out point. Drag the video over. And that looks nice, so we're going to copy what we did there, including the white balance and the highlights and the shadows, and paste that over there. There are some nice pine trees coming by, everything's the beat of the music, nice. So we're going to approach the door, and then we're going to go outside, inside, I mean. So there we go. We're approaching the door, awesome. Going up the steps, looks nice and rustic. You know what, that's probably good. At that speed. Paste attributes, and let's see how that looks. Perfect. All right, now we're going to go inside and we're going to continue on. All right, so I put a piece of video on the timeline that I'm happy with the amount of information. It starts at the beginning of the kitchen and it ends with the fridge. I think all the information is necessary to have. To cut off the fridge at the end, I think would be a mistake. So let's color grade this first. We're going to paste that attributes, and we're going to allow for that color grade or the Rec 709 LUT to come in place. So I'm happy with that, but the problem is it's not sitting on the beat mark, and I'm that picky that I don't want it to sit on the beat mark, or else the whole video just looks very unprofessional that way. So I want to rate stretch this, is what it's referred to, and I want to stick that in there. So I basically fast forward it so that this clip will end right at that beat mark. But here's the problem. When you hit play, see how it's all jittery like that? I don't care for that jittery all that much. So what we want to do is we want to put something on it called a warp stabilizer. You can't just put a warp stabilizer on something that you've rate stretched already. So I'm going to go there, and I'm actually going to nest to that sequence so that it's a body in itself. Now I'm going to go up and I'm going to hit warp for warp stabilizer. And I'm going to find warp stabilizer, and I'm going to apply that to that clip. So that warp stabilizer makes everything look nice and smooth, although it's not perfect. So we're going to wait for that to be 100% finished. All right, so that warp stabilizer is now finished. I'm a little encouraged because the difference between before and after as I zoomed into that particular frame wasn't all that bad. Sometimes you can add warp stabilizer onto a clip and it does some really strange things and makes the video look really strange. I'm pretty encouraged that this is going to be just fine. So let's have a look, see how smooth it looks now. I was happy with how smooth that looked, despite that in the middle, it sort of zoomed in strange. But at least it was smoother footage, so I'm happy with the way that that looks. So time to move on. Last clip was 5051, so let's find the next one, which is 5052. And just like that, we're at the end of the video. I placed everything, color graded everything, made everything up to Rec 709 color. Everything's all in place. I'm happy with the way that everything looks. I've made all the adjustments as I went. Everything's exactly fit in place. I ended with what the patio looks like at the end. The titling's all in place. I'm happy with the way that this video looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this proxy button so that we start dealing with all the files and their actual the way they are. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control M on Premiere Pro, and I'm going to save this file. Now, I have a preset set up for saving, if you believe it or not. It's called 4K. It makes the file, preserves the 4K size, but it doesn't make the file so huge that it's unmanageable. So you can't go crazy with regards to how do you go about saving a 4K file. Most of the real estate agents that I deal with don't want, 1 gig or 1.5 gig video files. They'd like to deal with something that's smaller than that. So I find a way to preserve the 4K without having to do multiple passes and stuff and go crazy. So what I need to do is I need to save this particular file. We're in this file folder. We're gonna make a file folder called New and Completed is what we're gonna do, and we're going to save this file, which is a long process. So real estate, estate Nicole, the property is 368 Wardlaw Avenue, and this is a branded video, and I'll explain that in a minute, or maybe not. Branded, and the date today is May the 24th in 2021, and save. And now that everything's set up and everything's fine, I'm going to hit export. I'm going to allow it to actually make the video. And just like that, the video is made. I'm going to end this video off by actually showing you the video we just made together. I'd like to thank you for tuning into this episode and potentially having a look at the other episodes in this series. You'll find links to all of those episodes into the description area of this video. Once again, thanks so much. My name is Mike. I'm with Wornstar Media. Please look if you've got any comments or anything like that. Please look me up. Happy to answer any questions or anything like that at all. Thanks again, and enjoy the final video.